whatever happens in Iran and Israel have complete effect in wherever it is in the world, especially in Nigeria. Shia have almost 9 million people in Nigeria. And that's a nation on itself, right? So they have massive following. And the fact that they have some reliance on Nigeria's powerhouse, they are Nigerian supporters, I think it should make sense. And again, when you look at what is happening in the Sahel, look at the terror groups in the Sahel. Most of these terror groups are cells orchestrated and planned by international actors. The major player, you know, in the Sahel, we have about 5 major terror groups, all of them under the umbrella of one terror group that is called Janim. Jamaatul Nasr al-Isra wal-Muslimin, that's Janim. So all under them, you have IGI, Islamic State in the Greater Sahara. You also have Masina Liberation Front. You have ISWAP. You have Boko Haram. And then you have Katiba Masina. So when you look at the direction, the guy who is in charge of Janim, which is the umbrella body that is governing all this terror group, is called Iyad al-Ghali. Iyad al-Ghali, this man was regulated, of course, was recruited by some Western interests, by some international actors during the Algerian rebellion against the French in the 1990s. And this is the man that is still heading. And when you look at their strategic direction, they are actually heading towards the Gulf of Guinea. It's not about some Fulani bandits trying to attack some natives, some farmers trying to fight with some herders. It is a strategic movement. The entire global conflict in the Middle East is around control of 2 things: energy and oil, energy and food. Then one of the most important thing again is the mineral resources, but the major thing is energy security and food security. And any country that have control of the Middle East have complete control of the global power. And that is why if you check historical antecedents, most of the religion that came from the Middle East have global spread. But religions that start from China or religions that come from China or India, they hardly spread globally because of the node of the place. That place connect all the continents of the world and almost all
you can move by land.
You can move by land, you can move by water. You have Indian Ocean, you have Arabian Sea, you have Mediterranean Sea, you have Persian Gulf, and at the same time you have the Euphrates and the Tigris River coming together, binding into the Arabian Gulf. So when you look at all those areas, it's a very massive high traffic area. So whoever control that area, control the whole world. And whatever affect that place flows down to this base. And when you look at the strategic direction of these terror groups, they are coming gradually, hitting the forest, pushing in towards the Gulf of Guinea. Some of them are helping, you know, some of the crises that we have in Benue, pushing towards Calabar. You also have another people that are coming from Ambazonia in Cameroon, pushing towards the Gulf from this side. And from this side too, you have another ones pushing towards Ondo, trying to hit. That is exactly the whole target, to control the energy supply of West African belt. And then we are all sitting and waiting. When somebody in Iran, like the Khamenei, you know, mentioned Nigeria, we were thinking that we should just take it and say, no, this guy should not. No, he is giving a signal. That means we need to up our game. We have to find a way to ensure that we have a very good relationship at the border to push these people, these attackers, to stay in those countries where they are attacking, in Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Chad, and Benin Republic, where they are. That is where we need to keep them. And the reason why you see some of these Fulani bandits have massive weapons is because majority of the people leading these terror groups are actually Fulanis. Not that they are supporting the Fulani agenda, but they are supporting the grand agenda that is pushing them, that is paying them. And when you look at what happened in Syria, Shara, the current president of Syria, was an ISIS member. Right? And then he was pushed by the same Israel, and he took over control of Syria, giving them airwaves to get into Iran. Now, the same case may likely happen where we have Amadou Kufa, who is the head of Masina Liberation Front, and then you also have Ilyas Ajibo, who is heading Islamic State in the Greater Sahara. All of them have relationship, tribal, of course, relationship. They could continue to flow with.
For years, the heart of West Africa has bled quietly. Silent villages turned to ash, families shattered by gunfire, and young boys turned into soldiers overnight. From Nigeria to Burkina Faso, Mali to Benin, a wildfire of terror spread like a dark plague. To the world, it seemed like yet another tragic chapter in Africa's long tale of instability. But what if the real hand behind the chaos wasn't local at all? What if the puppeteer pulling the strings of terror was half a world away, in Tehran? In a chilling intelligence leak intercepted by global security agencies, a pattern emerged, an intricate web linking Iran's Quds force to the sudden rise and sophistication of Fulani terrorist networks across the Sahel and the Gulf of Guinea. Disguised as pastoral conflicts and tribal disputes, these insurgencies were in fact calculated operations to destabilize the mineral-rich regions of West Africa. What looked like random acts of violence, burning villages, ambushed highways, kidnapped schoolchildren, were really nodes in a much larger sinister strategy. Oil, gold, uranium, cobalt, some of the world's most precious resources lie beneath African soil. Whoever controls them doesn't just get rich, they gain leverage over global economies. Iran, cornered by Western sanctions and crippled economically, was desperate for such leverage. And in the shadows, they made their move. Tehran saw in West Africa what few others did, a region teeming with resources, undergoverned, and straining under decades of corruption and poverty. Fertile ground for infiltration. News broadcasts tell the tale. Breaking news from Nigeria. The screen flashed on Arise TV. Fulani herdsmen armed with military-grade weapons stormed mining towns in Plateau and Zamfara states. Locals report seeing foreign-looking fighters speaking unfamiliar Arabic dialects. Across various local networks like Channels Television and TVC News, disturbing patterns began to emerge. Fulani attacks were no longer sporadic. They were coordinated, timed, and strategic, focused on areas with key economic or symbolic importance. In one broadcast, a journalist from BBC Africa stood in front of a ransacked school building in northern Nigeria and asked, "Why would cattle herders target schools and telecom masts unless they were part of a broader insurgent network?" Al Jazeera soon picked up the story. "We are witnessing a militarization of herdsmen uprisings," one analyst said. "This is no longer about land. This is geopolitics in disguise." Then came the shocking footage. An Al-Hadath broadcast captured a Fulani militant leader, unknowingly recorded, speaking of support from our brothers in the East who fight the enemies of Islam. Intelligence experts matched the accent and phrasing to Iranian-trained mercenary proxies, previously seen in Yemen and Syria. Cross-analysis of dialects by language experts confirmed a disturbing truth. These were not isolated African radicals. These were trained men, often educated in madrasas funded by overseas donors. French outlet RFI also chimed in. In Burkina Faso, fighters now wield advanced tactical gear. Where is it coming from? Who is training them? The questions lingered, but behind the scenes, answers were being formed. The Gulf of Guinea and Iran's crosshairs. West Africa's Gulf of Guinea was always a prize. With one of the world's busiest shipping lanes and trillions in untapped resources, controlling it meant controlling a critical artery of global commerce. The region spans coastal states like Nigeria, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Benin, and Togo, each a piece of a larger puzzle Iran wanted to rearrange. Iran's play was bold: unleash chaos, dismantle state stability, and install loyalist warlords over the mining and port territories. In Nigeria alone, over 70% of the nation's exports depend on the oil-rich Niger Delta, just a few hundred miles from where Fulani violence was peaking. Control of this region meant direct influence over global oil prices, a temptation too big for a regime under economic siege to ignore. Their goal? Create a corridor of control from the deserts of Niger to the coastal riches of Ghana and Togo. Quietly, they used sleeper cells to train radicalized Fulani factions. They laundered weapons through broken borders. They offered money, ideology, and firepower to any tribe that would listen. Unverified intelligence even suggested that some of the logistics were routed through Hezbollah intermediaries in Lebanon, expanding the geopolitical web further. But the world did. Israel and the US strike back. It was Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, that first confirmed what many feared. Using satellite surveillance and intercepted radio chatter, they exposed Tehran's secret operatives embedded in West Africa. Mossad's reputation for subtlety and accuracy meant that when they rang the alarm bell, Washington listened. The United States AFRICOM then launched a classified operation, Desert Firewall. Quietly and efficiently, they began cutting Iran's supply lines and neutralizing key militant leaders through precision drone strikes and coordinated ground efforts with West African militaries. Key ports in Lomé, Cotonou, and Tema were put under quiet surveillance. Coast guards were retrained, borders were digitized. The quiet war had begun. CNN broke the news weeks later. U.S. and Israeli-backed intelligence helped foil a massive Iranian-backed terror plot aimed at destabilizing Nigeria and seizing control of the Gulf of Guinea. Even the BBC weighed in. This marks a rare but clear intersection of Middle Eastern aggression and African vulnerability. The consequences could have been catastrophic. Sources close to the Pentagon revealed that at least 5 terror cells were dismantled in joint operations in northern Nigeria and southern Mali. U.S. drones captured footage of Iranian operatives guiding logistics shipments disguised as humanitarian aid. The footage was classified, but the findings were irrefutable. The tide turns in a small village in northern Benin. A young mother named Amina heard the sound of gunfire erupt once again as night fell. She clutched her daughter tighter, her whisper a trembling plea for survival. Weeks passed, but no peacekeepers came. Food supplies dwindled, and classrooms remained silent tombs of chalk and dust. The nightmare deepened, not by the absence of international will, but by the neglect and silence of nations that turned their gaze elsewhere, allowing darkness to flourish. In Nigeria, communities spiraled into deeper despair. The people lost trust in the ability of the government and military to protect them. Hunters were hunted, vigilantes outnumbered, and overstretched security forces pulled back into defensive positions. Without external support, drone surveillance remained grounded, blind to the movement of terrorist groups weaving through forests across Katsina and Zamfara states. Every new convoy that passed unchallenged, every cell that expanded without resistance,
you also have
added another
National
breathless
Liberation
layer
Front,
of
you have
fear
ISWAP,
to an
you have
already
Boko Haram,
suffocating
and then
region.
you have Katiba
Today,
Masina.
many in West
So
Africa
when you
remain
look at
in
the
chokehold
direction,
of terror.
the guy who
Iran's
is in charge
ambition
of
to
Janin,
spread
which
its
is the
shadowy
umbrella
empire
body
through
that is governing all this terror
continues to
group,
leave
is
its
called
mark.
Iyad
And the
al-Ghali.
scars are not
Iyad
only
al-Ghali,
unhealed, they
this
deepen
man
with
was
every
regulated, of course,
unanswered
was
cry for
recruited
help.
by some Western
Children
interests, by
still
some
flinch at
international
loud sounds.
actors during the
Farmers
Iranian,
still fear returning to their
Algerian rebellion against the
Pastors
French
and imams
in the
continue to
1990s.
mourn
And this is the man
congregants
that
lost
is
in
still
village
heading.
massacres.
And when you look at
But
their
there is
strategic
light
direction,
again.
they are
And for
actually heading
now,
towards the Gulf of
that
Guinea.
is enough.
It's not
The
about
battle
some
beyond
Fulani
bullets.
bandits trying to attack
This
some
wasn't
natives,
just a regional
some
skirmish.
farmers trying
It
to
was a
fight with
global
some
test of
herders.
resilience.
It is a strategic
Iran's
movement.
desire to
The
overrun
entire
West
global
Africa
conflict in the Middle
with
East is around
Fulani
control of
terrorist
two things:
proxies
energy
wasn't merely about
and
land.
oil.
It was about
Energy
control,
and food.
about
Then
bending
one of
the
the most
will of
important
the
thing again is the
continent
mineral
to feed the
resources, but
hunger
the
of a
major
regime.
thing is energy security
Thanks to the
and food
strategic
security.
brilliance
And
of
any
Israeli
country that
and
have
American
control of the Middle East
intervention,
have
the scheme
complete
was
control of the
exposed and
global power.
dismantled.
And that is why if
But
you
let
check
this be a
historical
wake-up
antecedents,
call.
most
The
of the
new
religion
wars
that came
aren't
from the
always
Middle East
declared on
have
battlefields.
global spread.
Yeah.
Some
But religions that
Two
start from
Abrahamic
China or
faiths.
religions that come from China or India, they hardly
funded
spread
by
globally
oil
because
hungry
of the
tyrants.
load of the place. That
Today's
place
weapons
connects
are not
all
only
the
rifles
continents
and
of the
bombs.
world
They
and
are
almost all
ideology,
the
You can
waters.
move by land.
disinformation,
You can move by
and
land,
foreign
you can move by
currency
water.
stashed
You
in
have
hard-to-trace
Indian Ocean, you
channels.
have Arabian Sea, you have
Africa
Mediterranean
must remain
Sea,
vigilant.
you have Persian Gulf,
The world
and
must
at the same
never
time
turn
you
a
have
blind
the
eye
Euphrates
again.
and the
For in the
Tigris
battle for
River
sovereignty,
coming together,
the most
binding
dangerous
into
enemy
the
is
Arabian
often the
Gulf.
one who
So when you look at
pretends
all
not
those
to
areas,
exist.
it's a very massive
And in
high
this
traffic
shadow
area.
war,
So whoever
silence
control that
is
area
complicity.
control